traffic, right? The trafficker that appeared in those years was some form of, a very tropical, sinister guy, who has some capabilities, but, was pretty much on the Mexican side of the border.
Yeah,
right?
a sweaty Mexican businessman who would kill other Mexicans.
Exactly. But, the narco terrorists of movies like Sicario, it's no longer bounded by national limits.
He's a global citizen.
Right. It moves across.
He's a world traveler. Right. A well-stamped passport.
In the first Sicario, I don't know if you remember the movie in detail, but they find these bodies, inside walls of the security house. I think on the U.S. side of the border, somewhere in New Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. So it's really interesting, right? Because then Hollywood, what it does is that it absorbs and promotes propaganda, right? But it changes and it shifts with the propaganda discourse as it keeps on moving forward, right? And so the years, the late 90s, 2000s, when Steven Soderbergh is doing Traffic, they have a very different idea of the trafficking world, right? There's a scene that I love to remember in Traffic that I think is just, a perfect symptom for what those years meant of the so-called drug war. I don't know if you remember, but it's Michael Douglas plays the drug czar.
I do remember that, yeah.
Right, and he's visiting the U.S.-Mexico border. I think he's by San Isidro across from Tijuana, right?
Yeah.
And, they're right at the edge of the border. He's with, with an entourage of, people working with him. And he's given this, how do you say this in
Binoculars?
English? Binoculars. Yeah. Yes. I couldn't remember the word. I was thinking the word in Spanish only. He's given this binoculars, right? And he's looking across almost as if they were in on the war front, right?
Yeah.
As if he couldn't cross over.
As you could see the little guys in sombreros bringing over the bags of hashish and Uzis.
There's a big truck that comes out of a security house that has like a scorpion.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a safe house.
That suitcase is weirdly gun-shaped.
I mean, basically on broad daylight, moving drugs, right? And it's supposed to be a safe house. How safe it is if you can see it from the U.S. side.
Yeah.
But then, not only is, of course, not only is very stupid, right, the way they're portraying, but then he asks the people around him, so who has my job on the Mexican side? And then they say very worrisomely, well, nobody. Like, oh my God, so who do we talk to? No one.
Yeah.
We just don't go across. And this is the most extraordinary moment, right? Because by 2000, right, there's been an entire decade of all kinds of treaties, of agreements, of basically coercion and extortion almost from the U.S. institutions in Mexico. Not only to do what they say, but to even replicate the very post that the drug czar had in the U.S. We had a drug czar in Mexico by that time, right? And it only existed because the U.S. willed it into existence, right? So what is amazing of this movie, right, is that it erases deliberately, right, the entire present history of the brutal violence of the U.S. national security paradigm in Mexico, right? And peddles this propaganda that Mexico is like some form of rogue country, right? That doesn't obey, that doesn't care, that doesn't even think of human value, right? And just basically ruled and governed by traffickers, right? And so it's just an astonishing moment, right? Because something is done in that movie that installs this idea of Latin America as this emptiness of lawlessness, right? Of violence, and this is done, mind you, by a liberal filmmaker, right? I mean, this is Steven Soderbergh, who's supposed to be, on the right side of history, right? And he's portraying actually the drug war debate from the democratic perspective. This is what some sociologists call the dove version of Hollywood, right? As opposed to the hawkish version, right? So he's a dove filmmaker, and when you really look at it, he's not. He's a hawkish filmmaker disguised as a dove filmmaker, right? And this is what is so powerful about Hollywood propaganda, right? That it doesn't even look like propaganda, that it looks like the best intentions of the U.S. left. Right. And this is what, should give us the guiding lesson, right, for what is then supposed to come later, right? The film industry became so entangled and so intertwined and so penetrated by the national security paradigm, by the Department of Defense, DEA, supervising their scripts, their productions, that by the time you get to Sicario, they're just bidding their war. They're doing exactly what they're told to do, right? And so the very first scene, one of the first scenes in Mexico in Sicario, I'll never forget it because I keep being wondering and just in shock and awe by this thing. Is, I don't know if you remember, it's Benicio del Toro, who plays, I think, as a State Department agent.
Yeah, I think he's like a former Mexican prosecutor turned hitman.
No. He's a hitman, but I don't think he's Mexican. I think he's supposed to be Colombian. I forget. But he's now a State Department agent, and then turns out to be CIA.
Yeah.
And he is with Emily Blunt, who's an FBI agent. Yeah. And they're coming across the border by Juarez, right? They're driving on the El Paso side. I'm from Ciudad Juarez, right? I'm from that city. And they're looking at it, and then they look at it and said something like,
"There she is.
Here it is, the beast." It's like,
Juarez.
The beast. And then they go into Juarez, right? And just as they cross the border, of course, they see
all the bodies
tons of bodies hanging,
right?
Down.
I mean, this jungle of violence and death. Yeah. And then they're coming back across the bridge, and there's a shooting, with this almost like animalized killers, right?
Yeah,
with all
they're Hulk. It's a very famous scene.
Very like tribal looking.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very psychopaths, that really look in a very racist way.
Yeah.
Like I kept thinking now of the Bukele prisons, right, in Salvador.
I don't know if you've seen they actually just look like MS-13 guys.
Absolutely, and that's what they were going for. And I kept thinking, what would it have been like to watch that movie in a Juarez movie theater, right? I mean, what would it be like for people watching this? Like, oh, we live in the belly of the beast, and we didn't realize it, right? My parents were living there. My brother, my nephews. I go to Juarez all the time, right? And just seeing my city and then my country portrayed as this, like Trump would say, shithole country. Yeah. Right? It's not only just shocking, but extraordinary, because most people accepted the film, even in Mexico. Right? I mean, they were like, oh, it was cool, that was entertaining, And this is really the danger of propaganda, right? It doesn't really look like it. I mean, they're basically criminalizing the entire country, but for the sake of entertainment, you really don't notice it, right? Yeah. And this keeps happening in series like Narcos and all kinds of productions, right?